Hey all, welcome back to Chip Stock Investor. We're going to focus on an area that we haven't talked about publicly in a few videos now, the equipment needed to manufacture semiconductor chips, a critical choke point in the industry. But first, before we get into it, we have a quick message from today's sponsor, Fiscal.ai. We'll be focusing on the company Onto Innovation, and Fiscal.ai has fantastic metrics that you can see at a glance right on the company homepage, like this.
And as you dig deeper into the Fiscal.ai terminal, there's all sorts of resources there. You can visualize the financial metrics that are most meaningful to you. You can dig into the earnings call transcripts and other documentation from the company's investor relations page directly within Fiscal. You can even search through those documents with new keyword search, the query feature, Fiscal.ai. We use it every day here at Chip Stock Investor to analyze the businesses that we invest in.
And one of the most amazing things about Fiscal is the data is updated within minutes of a company reporting. No other terminal out there like that. Make sure you check it out. Fiscal.ai/CSI get you 15% off. As a reminder, this is what we're talking about when we say that the wafer fab, packaging, and assembly equipment is a critical choke point in the semiconductor manufacturing supply chain. It's right there in the center. Everything that happens has to go through companies like this, including Onto Innovation.
Typically, when we talk about these businesses, we're talking about the Fab 5, ASML Applied Materials, Lam Research, Tokyo Electron, and KLA Corp. These companies are very powerful. They don't just provide the equipment needed to bring semiconductor designs to life and then installed into computing systems, but they actually are responsible for developing a lot of the IP that make the chips function properly and power the applications that we rely on every day. And specifically as it pertains to Onto Innovation, perhaps a company that you're much more familiar with that they compete with is KLA Corp, primarily in metrology and process diagnostic and control. They're at the top at every step in the manufacturing process. This equipment ensures that the chips rolling off the manufacturing line are without defect, that they'll work properly. And then also, whenever you have big ramp ups of new products, for example, high bandwidth memory, 4th gen, we're going to talk about that here in just a second. Companies like this are involved in working out the kinks, working out some of the potential issues that will come up in the manufacturing process to make sure that their customers are getting good yield.
We're borrowing this slide from Camtech, a peer of Onto Innovation, and this just helps you visualize some of the players that are in this part of the manufacturing equipment part of the supply chain.
They're in the bottom left quadrant of this chart, right below Camtech. Onto Innovation is charted out there. They do some front-end wafer development where they compete with KLA Corp. But primarily, Onto Innovation does wafer-level packaging and back-end assembly, or advanced packaging, as we often call it these days in the investment world.
And one of the leading pieces of equipment that Onto Innovation has is called the Dragonfly. What exactly does the Dragonfly do, Nick?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to pull off metrology, which is just the science of measuring stuff, our definition, non-technical definition. And one of the ways that you can measure stuff is by looking at it optically. And even just looking at something, there's a lot of different things that you can do. For example,
I perform a lot of metrology every single day.
You're looking at slides, looking at research reports. Beyond just visible spectrum of light, this can also be done with ultraviolet light, polarized light, infrared, microscopy. And in this diagram from Onto Innovation, they have a side view of a high bandwidth memory cube packaged alongside the logic, the GPU. So what you're looking at here as you're doing your own metrology and PDC is a lot of different ways that companies use metrology to control the final output. Make sure that the product, for example, Taiwan Semi-Manufacturing and its supply chain partners, are shipping product that is actually going to work when installed in the data center.
Now, you may recall there was a lot of pessimism surrounding companies like Onto Innovation. You can take a look at that here in the stock chart on the right. This time a year ago, headed downward almost to the previous lows. It's a significant downturn for the stock price. But Onto Innovation said very clearly that they expected to see a ramp up in the second half of 2025 in revenues and on into 2026. And that's exactly what you see play out here on their revenue chart. In Q4, back up to 267 million, back to all-time highs, and then expected in the next quarter, brand new all-time highs for this revenue for Onto Innovation.
And they actually said to expect that momentum to continue in Q2 of 2026. They said to expect roughly 300 million, and then the second half of the year revenue will actually be even higher than the first half. Now, they are getting the benefit of a small tuck-in acquisition they made last year. They purchased some assets from a private company called Semilab. We talked about this over on Semi Insider last year, especially in Q1 and Q2 of last year. And so that is starting to pay off. And they're picking up momentum in a couple of key markets. In this chart from fiscal.ai, we have the revenue breakdown by geography. In blue is revenue from Taiwan. So, of course, this is going to be primarily TSMC. And in orange, South Korea. That is going to be probably a bit from Samsung and its foundry, but especially the memory chip makers like SK Hynix. And Casey, I know you and I can especially recall a lot of that pessimism wasn't just Onto Innovation forecasting a brief downturn last year in sales. There was also a lot of pessimism for Onto Innovation and really the whole wafer fab equipment and advanced packaging equipment universe of stocks, that the big revenue segment from mainland China was going to slowly deteriorate in the coming years. But the pitch, I guess you could call it, was that geographies like Taiwan, South Korea, you can see even Japan picking up pace there a bit. That's probably a bit from Rapidus, as well as Japan's IDMs heating up again, have offset that decline in China. And now we're looking at a resumption of growth and new all-time high records being set again.
Yeah, ultimately it makes sense. Semiconductor manufacturing is not disappearing. It's just shifting into other locations.
And to be fair, it's hard to try to figure out all these different moving parts, but well,
that's why we're here.
I guess
that's why we have a job for now until AI takes over. All right, and what has this done for Onto Innovation on a free cash flow per share basis, especially over the last 5 years? Wow, great. It's done really, really well.
Yeah, over the last decade, mid-teens CAGR for free cash flow per share. But yeah, as you said, the last 5 years have been especially good, much, much higher than that. And this is fantastic. This was a small cap stock for most of this time period. I think most people, including us, would now consider it more of a mid-cap company, especially after making a couple of those tuck-in acquisitions and, of course, getting some nice growth as the industry moves from just advanced front-end wafer development to also now advanced packaging very much being a thing in the AI era. This is a company we're very much happy to hold in our portfolio. And if you think this is a growth cycle that's going to last for a year or two, driven by TSMC, the memory companies, and so on and so forth, this might be one still to take a look at. Mind the cycle, though, especially with companies like this. These cycles do tend to move pretty quickly just because the revenue can be quite lumpy. It comes in batches when they ship new equipment to help companies ramp up new product, expand manufacturing capacity, and so on. But this is one that I think for us, it has proven its place in our portfolio and is a long-term holding at this point.
Make sure you get that 15% discount on fiscal.ai, fiscal.ai/CSI, get you 15% off. Check it out now. And if you want a little bit of backstory on Onto Innovation, we covered it a lot. About a year and a half ago, we did a video on some of the chip packaging technology that Onto Innovation is working on. We'll link it right here. Watch it right now. And make sure you hit that subscribe button before you leave. Take care, everybody.